had a very traumatic exposure to the legal field. My closest friend when I was in elementary school, I literally witnessed him get hit by a car. A lawyer coming to my house to interview me to ask what I saw. That was probably the earliest inklings that led me that I might wind up in a career here.
Most people have the impression that attorneys are argumentative and combative.
Have a sounding board, someone you can bounce ideas off of.
The better you get as a plaintiff attorney, the better cases you choose to keep. But the better you get as a defense attorney, the more difficult the cases are to defend.
If I had any advice at all for young lawyers, it's to Welcome to Real Tough Lawyers. I'm Ken Miller, and today I'm here with my partner, Debbie Klauber. Debbie, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
We are going to talk to everybody today a little bit about how we got here. Before we get into the details, though, how long have we been working together?
I'm going to go with decades.
Yeah.
Been a couple of those.
It's been a while, and we've worked together closely for a long time now. All right, why don't you get us started and fire away?
Okay. I'm going to take you back. I'm going to take you back to a story, maybe something that I don't know about you. Is there a time that you remember as a child that you had some link to the law or some situation that perhaps made you interested in the legal field?
I'm not sure if this made me interested in the legal field, but I had a very early exposure to the legal field. It was actually pretty traumatic. My closest friend when I was in elementary school, we were walking home from school, and I literally witnessed him get hit by a car. Oh, wow. He was injured. He broke his leg. He was in a cast for a long time. And I don't remember all the details, but I remember a lawyer coming to my house with my parents to interview me to ask what I saw. And I don't know if that stuck with me, but I know as a child, I became fascinated with Perry Mason. And I used to watch that on TV all the time. And I think that was probably the earliest inklings that led me that I might wind up in a career here.
That's funny.
Yes. Well, it wasn't funny at the time.
Did he show up, with a briefcase and a tie like you would picture a lawyer today? Or?
I remember a guy in a suit. That's what I remember. I don't remember the briefcase, but I remember an older man in a suit walking into my parents' living room.
Yeah. I have a similar story from being young that I remember. And again, I'm not really sure that it took me here, but it was tied to the law in a way. And my dad was an FBI agent, and occasionally he would take me down to his office in downtown Fort Lauderdale, and up on the wall in the reception area where I would have to wait for him to do whatever it was he was doing, they would have the 10 most wanted posters. And I would stare at those pictures thinking, I'm going to go out in the wild and I'm going to find, I don't know what I was going to do with them when I found them. But I remember always being fascinated by it and fascinated by criminal law, until I was actually in law school and thought, there's no chance I'm going down that path.
When you were doing that, were you old enough to even appreciate that you wanted to go into law? Or
no,
you just...
I was young.
Okay.
I was young. I just think that was my first understanding of the law. And of course, my dad worked with a lot of criminal, a lot of prosecutors, federal prosecutors mostly, on cases. But all of the lawyers that he knew were only in the criminal world. They were prosecutors or defense lawyers that he knew from trials.
So how do you think that experience and your thoughts about that impacted your ability, or not your ability, but your path, essentially, that wound up with you eventually going to law school?
Yeah, it was never my plan. Law school was not my goal, being a lawyer. I'm not one of those people that wanted to be in a courtroom in trial. That was never part of the plan. But I was going through college as a business major, just like kind of everyone else at the time. And I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do with that. And again, it was my dad who sent me down this path and suggested that law school might be a great option. He thought it was a great education. He had worked for the FBI while he was in law school and loved it so much he never took a bar exam, so he never really was a practicing lawyer. But he thought the education and what you learn through the process of law school was great. And I thought it was just going to be 3 more years of college. What about you? Is there someone in your background that said to you, Ken, you're going to be a lawyer. You're going to be a lawyer someday. I see it in you.
Well, I'm sure if you ask my mother, she will tell you that throughout my teen years, I argued with her over everything, and that was the background of everything. And I don't think it was necessarily meant as a compliment, but I played football in high school, and I was the one guy on the team that seemingly always was questioning the coaches. So my coaches continually accused me of acting like a Philadelphia lawyer. I'm not sure I knew what that meant at the time, but in retrospect, maybe that was an inkling that that was some path I was going to wind up following. I went to college. I didn't know when I first got there that I wanted to go to law school. I kind of figured it out within a year or two that that was going to be my plan. I took a lot of courses not related to my major. I was an accounting major, but I took business law. I took law of mass communications. I took a lot of law-related classes because I found that I was interested in it. Because so by the time I was a junior in college, it was pretty much set that that's what I was going to do. Didn't know what I was going to do with it, but I knew I wanted to go to law school. But that was, and for me, it was a unique experience because nobody in my family ever was in that system. Nobody was in law enforcement. Nobody was in the legal system. So anything I did and that I figured out about it, I kind of figured out on my own as it happened. And it just kind of organically evolved to where that's what wound up happening.
And what do you wish you knew then that you know now, either going in as a young law student or coming out as a young lawyer? Is there something you wish you knew then that you know now?
Yes.
A lot of things, probably.
There's a lot of things, but with law school particularly, I wish I would have known then that the actual book work you're doing in law school is probably not as important as some of the other things you're doing. Specifically, making relationships, learning, who's who, figuring out how to get interviews, figuring out who to talk to, learning about the system. At least when I went to law school, which was in the late 80s, those types of things weren't a focus of law school. Law school was focused solely on teaching you how to think like a lawyer, which from an education standpoint is great, but it doesn't let you learn on what you're going to do when you get out of law school. So I wish I would have known more about the practical aspect of lawyering and being a lawyer when I first got to law school, because it would have altered the way I did things while I was in law school.
It's easy to look back now and see it for what it is, right? You have these courses that you have to take because they're a requirement, they'll be tested on the bar, but most of them, at least for me, aren't something you're ultimately interested in. Now you're still learning how to think like a lawyer and how to drill down on cases and understand the what and why behind everything. But you're right, what's going on outside of the classroom is equally as important.
Well, and there's another aspect of that too, and that's aside from just practicing within an area, there is nothing that you learn in law school about how to run a law practice or what to do. How do you make money? What do you do with the money? How do you help clients? What do you do with client money? At least when I went to law school, there was no discussion about that. I learned all that stuff on the fly at the first couple of jobs I ever had, talking to older lawyers who knew what they were doing.
Right.
And to me, that's a big difference in law school as opposed to, for example, medical school. Medical school doctors, once they complete it, they have to get training and they work with people in those fields. They have a better idea of what to expect when they get out. I graduated law school. I didn't exactly know what I was going to be doing.
Right.
Even though I had a job lined up, I had no idea what I was going to do at that job until after I got there. And even then, I bet the first 6 months, I learned more about being a lawyer from the secretary I had who had worked in the field for 30 years than I did in law school.
Sure.
So those are the kind of things that I wish I knew before I went to law school, because it would have altered the way I acted and I felt like I would have had a much better starting point.
Right. Eventually, you have to try a couple of different things before you learn the way that you end up. And if you haven't got that in law school, then you're getting it once you're out as a lawyer.
Right.
And I think, I struggled with, what do I want to do? How do I know what I want to do? And you really can't know until you try a few different things. So the sooner you do that, I think maybe the better off you are.
And I went through that. The first couple of years I was in practice, I worked at a couple different firms, did 5 or 6 different types of law, and realized primarily what I didn't want to do, and then wound up getting hired to do a job involving medical malpractice cases. When I got hired to work on malpractice cases, I had never even seen a malpractice case. I didn't know there was a difference between them and other types of cases. And as soon as I got into it, I fell in love with it.
Right.
I love the subject matter. I love the background. I love working with the experts. I love learning stuff. And that's kind of stuck with me. And that's been the primary focus of my career now for over 30 plus years.
Right.
If you had asked me in law school, are you going to be a malpractice lawyer? I would have said, absolutely not.
Right.
Because I didn't know what it was.
Why wouldn't I go to medical school and
Right.
be a doctor?
Right.
Right.
So there's a lot that, certainly now, as old as I am and have done this as many years, that I can look back and say, gosh, I really wish I would have known this, because it would have altered my point of view on things from the start.
But it is trial and error, right? I did the same thing. I worked for a firm for 5 different attorneys, everyone doing a little bit of and I kind of knew what I didn't like. And I came to realize I really did like the research and writing. I liked being around the litigation without being the focus of the litigation. And you can't know it without trial and error.
Right. And even within that, I gravitated towards obviously doing trial work. I've been trying cases for 30 years. And it's not for everybody, right? There's a certain personality you have to have. And my family has always thought it's the oddest thing that I became a trial lawyer, because generally speaking, I'm pretty introverted. And I'm not the life of the party guy. I'm the stand in the corner guy, just sitting there watching.
And making jokes.
But yet I have no problem standing up in front of people talking and trying to convince them of something.
Right.
And so it's a weird dichotomy, but it's one of those things that it just kind of happened organically. And I realized, hey, I actually like this. And thankfully, I've been pretty successful at it.
Indeed, you have. Let's talk about our practice. Let's talk about how we've evolved over time from a firm that represented hospitals and doctors for many years into a firm that's now representing, injured patients and their families, or families who have lost a loved one because of malpractice. How do you think that your defense work has helped you representing the clients that we have today?
There's a bunch of different parts of that, right? Number one, because we worked so closely with the people that were making decisions for the corporations and the insurance companies, I learned what's important to them. What is it that they're really interested in? What is it that troubles them about cases? What is it that causes them concern that makes them say, I better write these people a check to resolve this case?
That's right.
So that aspect, I feel like, has allowed me, when I'm representing people now, to focus in on what do we really need to look at, what do we need to focus on, and how do we need to present this? Not every case is the same. You can have 2 people that are injured in almost the same fashion, but they have a dynamically different or dramatically different impact on their lives. You need to be able to explain why this person is affected this way, this person is affected that way, so that the people making the decisions on trying to settle the cases aren't just, oh, that's a leg injury, that's all it is. I feel like I've learned how to take what I knew from defending cases and pour it into the other side to really make an impression on the people that make decisions, whether it's the insurance company or even a jury at trial.
And we also have the knowledge of what goes on behind the scenes in a hospital. Really,
True.
we always have understood how the credentialing process works, what the policies and procedures entail, and how the hospital and the risk managers handle things, so that when we're going to look for information to help our clients, we know where that information can be found.
And when we get answers that, oh, well, this isn't available, or we don't have this, we know if that's true or not, because we made those same arguments for a long time.
Right.
So I feel like I've got the ability to kind of see through what I'm being fed to know what's really important, what we need to go after. On the flip side, though, and that's a poor choice of words. It's not the flip side. It's another component to this. Those of us that work heavily with medical cases have had to learn medicine.
That's right.
I joke with people, I'm a lawyer, but I play a doctor on TV because in order to do what we do, we have to speak the language. We have to learn the terms. We have to understand what we're talking about, because if we didn't, we wouldn't be successful. Personally, my wife is a nurse, and she had been practicing for several years when we got married. So when I first started working on medical cases, I was always going to her, hey, what about this? What about this? Now, 30 years later, everybody comes to me to ask those
Right,
questions
right.
as though I'm an expert in medicine because I've spent so much time doing this. And again, when I was in law school, if you had said to me, 35 years from now, you're going to know all kinds of information about medical terms and how things work, I would have said, you're crazy. That's not what I'm doing. I'm being a lawyer.
Right.
But there's parts of this that expand beyond that. And like you said, we've kind of trial and error, and we figured out that that's what I really like, and that's what I've stuck with.
It is an enjoyable part of what we do is the medicine.
Yes.
I don't cross-examine expert witnesses and need to talk the talk the way that you do, but I need to be able to dig into the medical literature and understand, why testimony might or might not be permitted at the time of trial. And I agree with you. I think that's something unique about what we do, but it's what keeps bringing me back is that I really do enjoy the medicine.
Over the course of my career, I've been fortunate enough that I have worked on enough cases that have really, really unique medical issues that there have been times where I have spoken to people who are like the only person in this country that has knowledge about a medical condition.
Right.
And I have conversations with these people and I learn about that. To me, that's fascinating about this job. It's one of the reasons I've stayed in this field and done this as long as I have, and why I continue to do it, because I like things like that. I like learning new things. I like having that knowledge and having that exposure. And again, it's just something that we learned over time just by trial and error.
And it is a unique area of the practice that it's not form driven. Every case is different. We have to learn the medicine and the facts of the case every single time. It's a different story. It's a different medical procedure and a patient with a different medical history every single time.
From your perspective, given the roles that you and I have played over the years, how does that interplay work from your perspective? Being that I'm the one that out there kind of talking to the experts, taking depositions, but you're kind of behind the scenes directing me, with literature that you've researched, and here's the law, and here's what's your thought on the interplay of that?
It's an interesting, I think you said it best when you said you're the facts guy and I'm the law guy, right? You go figure out the facts and then I apply the law to see what can the jury hear, what can't the jury hear, what should the jury hear, what does the judge need to know, and how is the best way for us to go about it strategically. And that's one of the things I think about our firm in particular and the way that we have a team approach to every case. It just makes such a difference in the outcome. Having trial lawyers involved, someone like me on the research side of things, digging into the law or the literature, and then a paralegal and a nurse on board helping us discuss with the experts. And I think the outcome for our clients is so much better because of the team approach.
From your perspective, do you feel as though you get to do enough in the cases with the role that you play?
I do. I think I'm really involved in the case from the very beginning. A lot of people, when I first started my practice, or even when I first got to the firm, I was considered an appellate lawyer. And I haven't done an appeal on a medical malpractice case in I don't know how long. A, because they resolve, and B, because really there's no need for it if we strategically handle our cases the way that we should. So my role from the time we meet those clients until the settlement is concluded, I really am an integral part of the team, and I enjoy the teamwork that we do together and the strategy conferences and the case management conferences that we have, just trying to figure out how to get the best result for our clients.
I want to go back to something you asked me a few minutes ago about the switch when we switch sides. And I was thinking about this. One of the aspects of the switching of sides that I've noticed specifically is the period of time that we're involved with the cases and the amount of effort and the work that goes into it has changed dramatically. Mm-hmm. And what I mean by that is this. When we were defending people, we would get the case after the lawsuit was filed. Mm-hmm. Whoever was representing the injured party had already done all this work and laid out the case, and we were reacting to that.
That's right.
Now, in representing folks, I would say the majority of the work we do on these cases is before we ever file the lawsuit. We have to discover everything about them. We have to get all the details. We have to get the records. We have to come up with the theory. I find that I spend way more time on the front end of cases now than I ever did before. And I think that's generally true for most lawyers that represent plaintiffs, because you're driving the ship. we take the lead on the cases now. And so it's altered the workflow of the way we do things. And I don't know from your perspective if you think if it's changed at all.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think needing to know that you've got a case that's worth pursuing is the work. That's the front end of the work. We didn't get to choose the cases on the defense
True.
side, right? And I remember very early on in my career as a defense lawyer, one of my partners telling me, the better you get as a plaintiff attorney, the better cases you choose to keep. But the better you get as a defense attorney, the more difficult the cases are to defend. We didn't get to pick and choose them.
That is true.
And we had the bulk of the work ahead of us where the plaintiff's attorneys really had, we didn't realize it then the way we do now. They had already done the work in the background and sort of knew where their case was headed while we were still learning, how the case proceeds.
One of the things that you've embarked on recently is you've started teaching a class in law school this past semester. Tell us a little bit about that.
I have. So I've always wanted to teach, particularly medical malpractice. I just think it's a fascinating area of the law. And I thought the idea of teaching young, up and coming lawyers, would be a great way to give back to the community, in a different way. And I have had the opportunity this semester to be teaching to 2L and 3L students at Nova. And it's been a really eye-opening experience. It's been a lot of work, of course, learning the educational system and how to use the software that they use. But it's also been great to be around young people who are really still have sort of that little bit of awe about the practice of law. I remember working for my very first judge who had been involved in the practice of law for probably 50 years at the time. He had been practicing and he loved the law and he loved the equities and getting to the right result. And it was a great way to start your career with someone who really was inspired by the law. And I think that these young students, they are that way. They're excited about their careers, they're excited about their futures, and it's been a great experience.
Do you feel it's actually benefited you in your practice at all?
It has. It's forced me as I'm creating the curriculum and as I'm putting together my lectures for class, it's forced me to go back into the rules and back into the statutes. And every once in a while, I have an aha moment on something that I think, I had forgotten that. Or, just the details involved in a complex medical malpractice case and what we have to do to get the case through pre-suit and to get it into trial and to do all of the things we need to do. You forget about it sometimes. We get caught up in the business of doing and we forget about sort of the checklists that get us there because we're so, it's become such a habit for us, the way we handle those cases.
Have you had any opportunity to talk with your students where they've asked you any questions about advice in general you could give them for their career and their futures?
So they haven't. We're winding down to the end of the semester and I asked them a couple of things last week. And the first was, I want to know if there's something they were hoping to get out of this class, right? This is my first time teaching it, so they're kind of my guinea pigs. But I wanted to see, am I missing something? Is there some new angle? And I was kind of hoping that maybe some of them would step up and just ask me general questions about how I got here, these kinds of questions that we're talking about, because probably most of them don't exactly know where they're headed. And I remember spending time during law school, meeting other lawyers and asking them all, how'd you choose? How'd you get to this area of practice? And none of them said, I knew when I was 10 that this is what I would do. Right. They all said, I got this job and it sent me to this job and now that's how I got here. So hopefully we'll have those conversations in the next couple of weeks as the semester winds down and, they're all off. Some of them are graduating and, off to the bar exam in the real world.
So if they came to you right now, and ask you some questions about what advice you would give them about starting their careers or getting into the practice of law once they graduate, what types of things would you tell them?
I think I would tell them that you don't have to know. You just have to learn. You have to be open to trying new things, just like anything else in your life. In your career, you have to try things and decide what you do and don't like. And we all think that we need to know what we want to do, but knowing what you don't want to do really is half the battle. You can strike certain categories off of your list. You know, this world is changing, and what we need from young lawyers is far different from what we used to. It used to be that young lawyers would be off in a room going through cartons of boxes and organizing medical records or documents or, you know, medical literature. And now we've got AI that can do things like that. So really what they need to learn is they need to learn the human side of things, how to deal with clients, how to have a conversation, the things that, you know, AI can't accomplish.
You mentioned AI. Obviously, it's a hot topic for everybody in every field, not just the law field. Given the specific area that you work in, doing a lot of research and things like that, what's your impression of the benefits of AI to the practice, and what are the things you're concerned about with AI?
Yeah, I think it's a double-edged sword. I think it can be an amazing tool, and we have to use it. In fact, I've really been using AI for many years through Westlaw and the research I do, helping me navigate and get down to, you know, the core of what it is I'm looking for. It's an incredible tool that way. But then you have hallucinated cases if you go outside of a database where your information is limited. But it's here to stay, and we have to learn how to work with it. I think the idea of not having young lawyers who have to comb through documents looking for magic words, and that can be done by a system, is fantastic. But we also still do need the human side of things. You know, you sit across the table from families every day and have conversations about their injuries, their damages, how it has impacted their lives. That is something that you have to have a person to do, and it's the human side of things that can make a difference in the outcome of the case. How do you feel about sitting across from these families, and what's different about that compared to, you know, the work that we used to do?
Well, number one, the folks I'm dealing with now generally have no familiarity or experience with the legal system. They don't know the way things are supposed to work. They know what they've seen on TV or on a movie or something like that, which we know as lawyers is not very realistic. So one of the things that is very, very different for me is that I feel as though I'm really responsible for guiding these people on the correct path. When I represented hospitals and insurance companies, yeah, I was the lawyer on the case, but they were familiar with the system. They knew ultimately at the end of the day what their goals were. Majority of the people that I represent now don't know what the goals are of bringing a lawsuit. You know, many of them come in and the first things they say is, well, I want to make sure this doesn't happen to somebody else.
Right.
One of my jobs, honestly, is up front is to explain to them that's not really within our control. Most of what we can do involves civil remedies in a civil lawsuit, which is money damages. That's what we can do for you. Now, that doesn't mean that the doctor or the healthcare provider that's involved is not going to get deposed. They're not going to have to answer questions. They're not going to be made aware that there's an issue, but it's not like a lawsuit that I can represent people in is going to cause this doctor to lose his license.
Right.
That's not realistic. So part of what I'm doing at the outset is making people understand what the system is. How does it work? What's available to them? What I can do for them, what I can't do for them, and make them understand the processes that are involved to really decide if they want to get engaged in this system or not. That's a very, very different role than I used to have when I represented other types of clients.
And a much more personal relationship.
No question. You know, if I see somebody, I speak to them, you know, I always tell all my clients, all of them, you've got my phone number, you've got my email. If you have a question, reach out. I'm available. It very rarely happens. People feel like they're bothering you, but it's almost like a joke. I'll give you an example. I had a Zoom meeting yesterday with a client and her two sons. Her sons are adults, and we were talking about whether or not we were going to pursue a claim on behalf of her husband, who unfortunately passed away. And we were on the Zoom. I was talking to them for about 45 minutes. And at the end, I said, if you have questions, reach out to me. And they're like, yeah, no, we're fine. I'm like, no, seriously. I know what happens. You're going to hang up. You're going to talk to each other. And 5 minutes later, you're going to have questions. Call me. I'm happy to answer them. That's a role that I feel like I have to play now.
Right.
Not that I have to, but that it's a part of the job is to just educate people, help them understand what's going on, not just here's your case, we can get you X.
Right.
That's very rarely the conversation that we have with anybody, certainly at the outset of a case.
That's right.
Well, I'm going to go back to AI just for a second.
Okay.
Because it's a intriguing topic.
It is a hot topic.
Do you have any thought that, AI is going to wind up replacing lawyers?
I don't think it can happen. I think there might be some areas of practice that are impacted more than others. But, your example of talking to your clients yesterday about their case, or what about a case where you have to let the family down and tell them you don't think you have a case? All of this requires some empathy and sympathy and something that I just don't think that AI can proffer. And that's not exclusive to medical or personal injury cases. That happens across the board in family law cases and probate cases. You have a family breaking up or someone who's passed away. The relationships that we have with our clients and the human factor is just going to become more important. As AI does improve our ability to do things, undoubtedly, but I don't think there's any fear. I wouldn't discourage young people from going to law school. And then again, going to law school doesn't really limit you to a life as a lawyer. You can do lots of things, with a legal degree about running and buying and managing businesses that, the knowledge is just great to have in general.
I think it's another thing as well, the part you just mentioned, the personalized emotional connections we make. That's another piece that I feel like law schools don't teach.
That is true.
And I don't know that they can, because it's not like they're going to expose students to all people in the real world. They don't have that ability. But my ability to have empathy and sympathize with them is not something I think I had 35 years ago. Right. It's something I've learned as I've gone through this process. Initially, as I watched other people do it, learned from that, and now I've kind of figured out how to do it. Going back to the issue of young lawyers, right? One of the issues that I see right now with a lot of young lawyers is when they come out of law school and they don't know what they're going to do, they just go hang up a shingle and say, I'm starting my own firm, I'm in practice. And there are people that can do that. But I think they're doing themselves a disservice. Law school does not necessarily teach you how to run a law firm, how to interact with people, how to find clients, and then even if you get them, what you're supposed to do with them once you have them. If I had any advice at all for young people, young lawyers in particular, it's to find a way to work with other people. Have a sounding board, someone you can bounce ideas off of. When I was doing defense work, occasionally I would get cases with young lawyers, and it was obvious when they were solo practitioners who had nobody to talk to, because they would do things in cases. You're like, what are you doing?
Right.
Whereas if you had somebody there that you could speak to or get ideas from, it may avoid some of the problems that they run into. But I don't know how to solve that problem. Right? It's a problem. I think we all know it's a problem, but I don't think anybody has a solution. The bar certainly hasn't come up with a solution. They talk about mentoring programs. Mentoring programs are great, but mentoring programs are not the same than if you're working with somebody and there's a common goal that you have between the two of you to get something accomplished. It's very different than going to talk to a random person and say, hey, what do you think I should do here?
Right. I've been practicing for 30 years and I still need a sounding board on a regular basis. I can't imagine practicing without it.
Right.
And having those relationships, hopefully in your own firm and around the corner and next door, makes a huge difference in your ability to practice law and to learn what you're doing and why you're doing it.
There's another component too, and it's not something we all as lawyers like to talk about, but we have a lot of lawyers in Florida. And so I recognize that one of the reasons people go out and just start their own firm is because they can't find jobs that they're interested in or that are available. I went through it 35 years ago. I didn't have 400 offers when I was coming out of law school. I took what I could get. But the key is, to me, is to figure out what works and learn from it, work hard at it, and get better at it. Because where you start out is clearly not where you're going to finish. Where you started out, where I started out, is nowhere near where we are today. Right. And that's the concept that I think if we could talk to young lawyers or people in law school like your students and make them understand that. And it's just kind of a concept, right? It's real hard to wrap your head around that when you're not living it. But it's definitely something that's changed that I've seen in my practice over the 35 years that I've been doing this.
And the law schools are different now. I mean, they do provide these clinical experiences for the students where they get face to face with the client and have an opportunity to, create these relationships and sort of understand how to communicate with the client, what the case is about, what's going on. But it's just little bits and pieces. They don't get to stick around for long enough to see the case, reach its resolution.
What about, from your perspective, what is it you think that most people get wrong about what lawyers actually do?
I think most people have the impression that attorneys are argumentative and combative. I don't think that most people, I guess there's a stereotype for a reason sometimes, but I think, at least in our practice, that everything we do is very collaborative. We collaborate within our firm. We collaborate with other attorneys in our practice area. Constantly there's a flow of information about, things that are happening in the cases, things that we're seeing in the courts. And then we have collaboration even with the attorneys on the other side. I think a lot of people don't understand that that's really how it works, that we really, while we are there and we are zealously representing our own clients, we can respectfully agree to disagree and get to either an answer or a resolution that makes everyone happy moving on, or to put it in the hands of a jury to decide, what really should happen and what the outcome should be.
I think there's that component is absolutely true. From a more practical standpoint, I think one of the things people get a misconception of is that lawyers know everything about every area of the law.
Right.
And we don't. There's clearly areas. I mean, I don't practice in family law. I don't do wills and estates. I don't do things like that. Yet people see that you went to law school and they just assume you know that. Mm-hmm. And so one of the things that I think is important as a lawyer is to actually understand what you do know and make sure that you practice within that area, and that if there's really something you're not comfortable with, you put that client in the hands of somebody who is. Because otherwise you're doing the client a disservice and you're doing yourself a disservice.
That's right.
Just because client X wants you to do something doesn't mean you should do it if you're not comfortable doing it.
That's right. And that's one of the benefits of this merger with Osborne and Francis, right? So now we're Osborne, Francis, and Pettis, and they do additional areas of practice. We've got personal injury, mass torts, premises liability, other cases that we haven't focused on in a long time because we've been biding our time, making our time working on these medical cases. But we also do have contacts in the community, people that we work with regularly who we know well, who we can refer those kinds of cases to. And it is important, you're right, to know what you can do and what you can't do. And again, hard for a young lawyer who's got their shingle on the door trying to make ends meet, saying no to a case when it's a little bit outside of, what they should probably be handling.
It's not common, but you read the people that get in trouble with the bar. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times it's because they take on things that they're not capable of doing. And instead of stopping and asking for help, they try to push through and they're just not capable of doing it. And that falls into that category, like we were talking earlier. What advice I would give a young lawyer is, again, know what your real limitations are and know what you need, know when to ask for help. Right. We've had the benefit over the years, as you mentioned, that we've had a firm where you can walk into my office, I can walk into yours, and we can ask for help.
Right.
If you're by yourself and you don't have that,
that's right.
Sometimes you just skip that step and it's to your own detriment and your client's detriment.
I think we've been fortunate, you and I, that our paths led to this place where we really genuinely found an area of the law that we like, that we enjoy, that we find intellectually stimulating, and where we're helping people. I mean, we've been fortunate. But if you hadn't gone down this path and you weren't practicing law today, what would you see yourself doing?
So there's a couple of parts to that answer. Number one, when I went to college, I was an accounting major because I didn't know if I was going to go to law school. And I said, well, here's something I could make a career out of. By the time I finished my undergraduate degree, I really didn't like accounting. And I said, there's no way in the world that I'm ever going to work in this field. What I retrospectively look at and wish I could have done and would do otherwise if I wasn't a lawyer is I love history. I would have figured out a way to either be a history professor or I would have been someone who goes on historical journeys, archaeology studies, looking things up. I am fascinated by that. So I think the older me, now 35 years into the practice, would say that's what I would have done.
Interesting.
What about you?
So I think twofold. Number one, now that I've made this foray into teaching, I think I could see myself doing something like that. It's great to be around the young people and the excitement and the just starting out, attitude that they have. But I also think that, again, this is many years into, I hated science. I was not a science fan, but I think nutrition would be something that I would be very interested in. I've just come to be really fascinated by it. And if I could go back and do it all over, I think probably instead of a finance major, I might go down a different path of something like that. But it's hard to know.
Going back for a moment to the change from the representing corporate defendants to plaintiffs, knowing what you know now about that practice, if you could pick and choose, would you have made that change earlier on?
I can definitely tell you that representing families and people who have been injured by medical negligence is a much more personally fulfilling area of the practice. I like the law and I like the medicine, and it really, for me, much of the work is the same. But at the end of the day, I think you mentioned it before, the gratitude that our clients have for the work that we're doing on this side of the V really is much more satisfying for me. What about you? You think that?
Yeah, if I could have anything I wanted, I clearly think I would have made the switch earlier.
Right.
I didn't dislike representing hospitals and doctors. I'm certainly not talking bad about them, but I can honestly say in the 20 plus years I represented them, I can probably count on one hand the number of times people generally came to me and were thankful for the effort I put in. Within the first couple of years of representing injured people, I've literally had people crying hysterically on the phone telling me how I've changed their life.
Right.
That's just such a different perspective, and it just makes you feel better about what you're doing.
It does.
And so, yes, so if I could have done that sooner, I think I would have in retrospect.
Yeah. But we're on the right track.
We're on the right track, and we've found ourselves here, and I think we're both pretty happy that we're where we're at.
Agreed.
Thank you for listening to us today. This is Real Tough Lawyers. We hope that you take away something from today that stays with you. Thank you for listening.